Welcome back to the Arize platform. In our last video of setting up monitors for an NLP sentiment classification use case, we set up monitors to troubleshoot performance over time for an unstructured model. In order to get to this step of doing the performance tracing, so the actual troubleshooting of an unstructured model, you can go into your Arize models, click on the demo NLP sentiment classification language drift, and then go into the embeddings tab. Now we are seeing our data set. So we're using a production data set over a given month time window, and we're comparing that baseline to a training data set. You can make any comparison to any baseline. It could be a custom baseline. You can even use a production window or a particular version of a production window. So you can have as many training, validation, and production sets as you like and compare them as you will. You can set monitors on top of these to troubleshoot and monitor things like performance and drift over time. Here we're looking at the dimension text vector because we entered in our embedding, and now we can look at our metrics. So things like cosine similarity and Euclidean distance are how we're going to measure drift between our production and baseline data set. We can add filters if we want to get a more granular view. Here we are seeing a pretty high drift. So when you're looking at Euclidean distance over time, when there's a higher distance, that means your data sets are drifting away from each other and increasing the distance. What you ideally want is low embedding drift, which means there's not much distance between one data set and the other data set. But here we're seeing a very large discrepancy between our data sets. So this is where we want to focus overall. I can highlight and focus in on this through the magnifying glass, or I can select the region that has a lot of drift. Now that I selected a region, I can generate my UMAP. And so this is going to be my drift over time. Remember, this is an NLP sentiment classification model, so we are classifying based on positive, negative, and neutral reviews. So ideally, we have 3 clusters. If we're looking at these clusters, we're seeing cluster 2, cluster 3, and then a very large cluster here. But let's go in and see exactly what is in each one of these clusters so we can start troubleshooting this large drift over time. Note, we can also color by data set or color by prediction label, actual label, or correctness. If we color by correctness, we do see that there's a lot of correct kind of cyan or blue colors here and a lot of incorrect answers going on here. So let's explore that map. I'm going to go into my full screen view. I can zoom in, I could freeze the frame, and I can select. I can also lasso individual points that I care about. So for cluster 1, let's see here. If we're going into cluster 1, that's this highlighted area off to the side. We see the breakdown is all production, 0 baseline. So first, that's what it's telling us is that most of this data is in production and not in our training data. So that's a red flag. Normally, if we're only seeing something in production and not in training, the model isn't good at providing a classification. So it's not good at providing a sentiment analysis. Just for comparison, if we look at cluster 2 here, just to zoom out, and you can put this in a 2-dimensional view, but we do recommend using the UMAP. UMAP is our Uniform Manifold Approximation Projection. So it's a dimensionality reduction technique that helps take those embeddings from a large dimensional space and project them in a lower dimensional space so you can understand what's going on in these dimensions. Things that are closer in this space are more related. Things that are further away are less related. So here we're seeing a lot of results for exactly what I needed. This looks pretty positive, actually. We're seeing positive, positive. So we're predicting positive. We're labeling positive. We're seeing great reviews. I love the waist and stretch. Very comfortable. I love the colors. Absolutely loved it. Comfortable. Looks great. So these are classified as positive, and they actually are positive. So that's for our positive class. Here, if we look at this secondary structure with a lot of well-labeled points, so a lot of correctness here, I'm going to select some points from this part and see that this is likely the neutral. So if we're labeling positive, negative, and neutral, we're seeing there's a lot of neutral labels here. So adorable, much larger, pretty big, very good, kind of disappointed. So about neutral reviews, anything we would say it isn't super positive but isn't super negative would fall under neutral for our classification. And we're seeing we're doing a pretty good job at the prediction versus the actual label, but we can see where we start going wrong. And if that is our positive and neutral, then most likely this part here is going to be our negative. So we're having our negative label, broken less than 2 days. These are negative reviews, and we actually do a pretty good job at the classification of these. So what is weird here? What's actually going on that is different than expected? We want to move around our UMAP. We still have this random cluster out here that is different than the rest of the clusters. This is our cluster that has a lot of drift, so -1 drift. 100% of these data points are in production, and as you can see from all the red, we are getting a lot of mislabeled cases. So if I want to select some points from here, we can go in and see exactly what the problem is. So the first thing that we notice, besides there's a lot of actual and prediction labels that are wrong, is that these reviews are in Spanish. So the other reviews that we did a great job classifying were in English, but the Spanish reviews we're having a hard time classifying, and they're way out here in their own cluster because they're so different from the rest of our data. So what we want to do at this point is make sure our model is equipped to handle Spanish language. If not, we may want a secondary model that's only equipped for Spanish reviews, or we want to add that capability to our current model so we can begin troubleshooting and get better performance over time.